All right.
Okay, cool. All right, so the big through line with everyone who answered my poll questions on Instagram was that they wanted to really learn about discipline. Like, 'cause that seemed to because like a lot of the input I got from people seemed to sort of circle around that topic of like how to, stay consistent with your diet, how to get back on the horse after you've, really kind of lost your way a bit, whether through injury or life changes or like one of the answers came from one of our up and coming fighters who like just blew out his knee, and so he like probably 6 months ago, and so he's looking to get back in
Yeah.
after I think the official diagnosis was it was like a full ACL tear, and so he had to obviously go through surgery and has been trying to rehab that. And then I got answers talking about like sticking to like a diet, which is as as a trainer, and I certainly know from personal experience with myself and also with many clients, that's often the biggest issue that people have is staying consistent with their dietary part.
Yeah.
And like so it really always comes down to discipline. I know I harp on it a lot. I know you probably deal with it a lot with your clients, both in the fitness space and the mental performance space. So I feel like that's probably the big, like, sort of like big topic that we should attack.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things you talked about was the difference between motivation and discipline.
Absolutely.
I think one of the key factors there with that problem is that most people wait to feel good before they act, right? They're like waiting for the motivation. And I think
hmm
that's just a death sentence to motivate, a death sentence to momentum, because discipline is more of an identity. It's like who you are, and motivation is more of a mood.
Well, yeah, like I remember it was one of the Gracies, but he had said years ago that people often confuse motivation for enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And I feel like that really hit because like you have
Yeah.
like that deep rooted sense of motivation. That's like your why. Then that's sort of like what gets you
Yes.
going and like that drives you to achieve whatever. But oftentimes, like when people like think motivation, they think it's like because they watched Rocky or something, so they're really enthusiastic about training,
Yeah.
and, and so it's
It's
super
it's it's
fleeting.
uh it's yeah, motivation is emotional fuel, right? It's like it's good for short bursts. It's usually some sort of like external inspiration. Like you said, you see Rocky, you see a movie, and then it's triggered, and then you're like, oh, I gotta go work out, right? But discipline, I think when we look at the difference between the two, it's not the emotional fuel. In fact, it's oftentimes, you depend on the system of discipline when your emotions don't cooperate with you, when you don't
Mhm.
feel like doing it. Nobody wants to get in a ice bath. Like you could do it. I mean, and you've done it days in a row for a long period of time. I don't know if you still
Yep,
do,
absolutely,
but you still feel
absolutely.
like you still have no desire to get in there. But there's a part of the discipline of it, right? It's a system that you've built that says A, then B, then C, and if I follow that structure and this is who I am, I'm a person who cares about my health. I'm a person who cares about recovery, my mood, how I get into a good, focused state. I rely on the discipline of that, not because I'm not
Mhm.
going to be motivated. I'm not going to have the emotional fuel to just, oh yeah, let me get in this ice cold freezing bath. Like, doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? Because you
Yeah.
go
Oh,
into fight or
absolutely.
flight. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's this internal shift. I feel like that needs to happen of, I feel like doing it needs to go to I am the type of person who does it. And I feel like doing it is the motivational side. I am the type of person, the identity is the discipline part of you, you know?
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. And like, yeah, like that's something I've experienced both like with the ice baths or like even like more recently I started like really recommitting to the idea that I'm going to fight again. And
Hmm.
I even talked to one of the local promoters. We're going to do, the goal is to fight for Cage Titans like early 2026. And
Hmm.
so basically, like, I'm now sort of pivoting that sort of mindset from being purely coaching to now be like, okay, I have to be a fighter again. And part of that is like So me and Manny Bermudez now once a week we get together and we do hard MMA rounds, and that
Hmm.
happens every Tuesday. And I never want to do it in the morning. I think of every opportunity I can to like not do it, and
Yes.
it's like, but it's something that you committed to. You do it anyway, and it's funny. And
Yes.
now, like, it got to the point where I did them today. It was actually, he and I had a lot of fun doing it, but we were like going hard. But but it's never something that like I want to do. In the morning, you even kind of dread it a little bit because we're basically fighting.
Right.
And so it's like, so it's you're literally in fight or flight, but flight stops being an option. and,
Yeah. Yeah. And like when we think about like what you just said there, you probably don't, relying on willpower because willpower is finite. We know that
mhm,
willpower tapers off. And if you're tired, if you are lacking clarity on something, if you just didn't sleep well, or you've got too many things going on, or your family life is crazy, any other variables are going to zap your willpower and desire to do something. But when you have systems built, like you said, and discipline, right? The discipline of showing up and doing those rounds, those hard sparring rounds, that gets wired into your identity because you're repeating it. You've planned to do it every
mhm,
week. Environmental design, you have another person, right, that you now have to rely on that is showing up. So
mhm,
you have to show up, right? And then also too, I'm sure, and you may not be doing this consciously, but I know for me, I visualize too, like you're doing it automatically. You're thinking about what it's going to be like when you do show up and you do those rounds, and you may be playing through those scenarios in your head before you even go. That's you wiring in that discipline, that identity discipline through those different processes, repetition, that visualization, whether conscious or unconscious, and also environmental design. And when you do that, you don't have to rely on willpower, right? Your performance is going to be just so much better because motivation asks how you feel, discipline asks who am I. And I'm a person who, this is, if I want to fight in 2026, then I need to become somebody that I haven't been over the last couple of years, and that somebody I'm becoming is disciplined, clearly, right?
yeah,
Because if you're not working, your opponent is, and that means they're
mhm,
getting in more work than you and getting training more skills and maybe better conditions. So you need to step up and have that discipline. Um, and you can't negotiate with yourself. I think that's a big part of it too. When you have standards and you have a system put in place, you don't need to negotiate with yourself. You just show up, right? And like you
mhm,
said, even when you're beat up, even when you know it's going to be difficult, you're still showing up because you have that system. It's scheduled. There's people that are there, that are relying on you to show up, etc. This is why people hire us as personal trainers, is because oftentimes they want, not even that they don't know what to do, they just need somebody there that they can show up to and be relying on.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Like
yeah.
I tell people like often that like 80% of our value is that like I'm forcing you to be at, at a certain place at a certain time to do things you probably don't want to do. Because like,
Yep.
the internet has taught us that like these weren't knowledge problems. Because like you can get great workout plans for free through Google, through ChatGPT, through whatever.
Oh yeah.
And but when you're not beholden to anyone else, it's so much easier to sort of quit on yourself. And now actually that this sort of leads into sort of a question I had for you though, where how would you go about establishing those systems? Because I feel like an easy hack is to hire a coach who's then going to sort of like add that external reinforcement to help you sort of stay within the lines. But if somebody
Yeah.
were really trying to build that out for themselves, what would you recommend?
um well, so with developing new habits, I think the way that you do it is through understanding a couple key things. Obviously, you have to be clear on what your goal is. What's the task that you're trying to
Mhm.
do for personal training, or people have fitness goals. You need to know exactly what it is you want to move towards. So that's first and foremost. You always have to have a North Star. If that's fighting, I don't know, maybe you have some examples of what that is. If you have a fight date on the
Mhm.
calendar, clearly that's your goal. You want to peak on that day, right? So everything you're doing, everything you're training, everything you set up your whole periodized training camp is going to be based on peaking on that day. and
Mm.
building the quality, the skills outside of training camp that you then can bring in and focus on conditioning and refining all those things, game planning, doing all that stuff. So you're gonna do all that, but I would say the clarity is the most important aspect of getting the discipline to do it. I also think too, it's not focusing on outcome based habits, right? So we want to focus on more process habits or identity
Mm.
habits. So thinking about like the goal isn't to, for fitness clients, for example, the goal isn't to uh lose 20. Well, the goal is to lose 20 pounds, but the control that I have is in the process. I can't control the outcome whether I do that or not, so but I can
Mm.
control how I stay disciplined and act every day. That will then move me closer to the 20-pound weight loss. And so I need to focus on the process and say, um the goal, my tasks that I'm going to complete throughout the week are, I need to work out, let's say 3 times a week for 60 minutes. And that's really like, that's what I focus on. I just need to complete that. Now, what I go and do, maybe I have a coach, maybe I go on ChatGPT and I have it build me a program. Maybe I buy it, that program somewhere online, or I find one in men's fitness or whatever it may be, women's health. But I find something and I follow that. Maybe I'm just running for 60 minutes, 3 days a week, whatever it may be. But you need to pick something that you can now fulfill those tasks, because what happens is over time, like we said, you're not going to feel motivated. But if you have a specific task that is building your identity, right? Because in order to lose 20 pounds, I've got to be a person who is living a healthy lifestyle. What does a
Mm.
person who lives a healthy lifestyle do? Right? What do they do? Well, they work out this many times per week. They focus on, and we'll talk about diet. They focus on diet, nutrition, in these key areas. And so then you start to, once you've mapped that out, who do you need to become? What are the different tasks and the different intentions I need to have every day? What does that look like? And then the results come. You peak at training in the end of training camp because you followed the process. You lose the 20 pounds because you followed the process of working out the specific days that you planned out. Then you can, if you just start there, you're going to be successful. But I do think like there is some fine tuning. This is where coaching comes in. Well, what should I be doing during those 3 days at 60 minutes? How do I break that up so that it's most effective moving towards your goal? Those are things you can fine tune, but just getting started and I think checking those boxes of process is really what
Mm.
allows you to become a person. And then when you're living within that identity, that's when I think the discipline just comes, because then you say, well, if I'm a person who works out this many days a week, I need to be disciplined. I have to be.
Mm.
And so you have to start showing up in that way, and then getting the support around it too. I think setting up your environment is extremely important to do that. Do you have access to a gym, and is it convenient and easy to get to? Is your workout at a time of day that's like a no miss situation, or is it at the end of the day when work calls or family things can disrupt your flow of things? I think you need to plan all those things out, and plan within your environment to make sure that you leave the most amount of success opportunities out of that.
I think that's such a good point, because like one of the things that I often talk about with people who are either just trying to come back from either like an injury, or just like say like they just lost their way for a period of time because life gets in the way, as it wont to do, that it's so important to sort of build momentum by stacking easy wins. And so sort of
Yeah.
understanding kind of like what's going to be most convenient. And I've even like told people that like I think it's huge when you're just getting started or just trying to get back to it, to set
Yeah.
your level of expectation below what you know you could optimally do. So if you know if the
Oh,
stars
so true.
yeah, if the stars align that you can make it to the gym, 6 days a week for an hour a day, then like make yourself do three, and then anything else is a bonus.
Yes.
And like
Yeah,
it,
it's like that expectation reset, I think, is exactly true. It's not about, pardon me, it's not about getting back to where you were before the injury. It's about building that forward momentum from where you are now. But this time, after you've gone through an injury, especially, you can be smarter about it. You can be stronger about it. You can be more aware of it, of the things that put you in that place in the first place. Perfect example. I competed in the IBJJF Boston Open this past Saturday. I had two matches, semifinal match. I got a quarterfinal bye, was in the semifinals, finals. Injured my ankle. It was already a little bit injured and it was tweaked going in. but went for a kind of guard pull right into a butterfly sweep takedown. And I hit
Mhm.
it, but my foot got folded underneath my opponent and completely twisted. And I immediately felt I can feel, and then even if you watch the video back, you could see me hopping on my right foot because I just couldn't put pressure because we got back to standing and I just was like, well, shit, I got to deal with this now, and I still got 3 minutes left in this match. So, and if you've ever been in a match or a fight where you're battling it out with somebody and you feel injured or you're hurt, it's psychologically it can completely pull you away from what your goal is and what you're supposed to do. So I had to stay focused. And but after the match, my ankle blew up. I can't train this week. I could. There's things I could do, but instead, I looked at it and said, okay, I'm not going to be able to jump right back in and do what I was doing before. It's not. It's just not possible. Physically, my body's not there. Even if mentally and psychologically, I'm like want to do it, my body just won't be able to keep up. So I
Mhm.
need to build from where I am now. What can I do right now that's going to move me a little bit forward, and I'm going to be smarter about it. So I went to the gym today still, and I got in, red light. I did the sauna. I did a bunch of tissue work on my ankle. I did some balancing work. I did some voodoo flossing, to compress it and squeeze out some of the inflammation that's there. I'm doing all things to help. I'm walking better even just after going to the gym and doing that. I feel better after that. And so now I've already made a little bit of improvement, not because I went in the gym and tried to do too much or I avoided it altogether, which is the other side of it too, that some people
Mhm.
do. And they say, oh, because I'm in this boot, I can't do anything. I can't work out. Well, no, you could sit on a bench and you could press plates away from you and a bar away from you. You could still bench press. You could still push up. You could still do things. It's just, are you going to make excuses about it or are you going to build from where you are? And I think you said it exactly perfectly. It's about like, changing your expectations around what's possible for you after an injury and not trying to get back to where you were before right away and just figure out how can you make small wins and build some momentum.
Yeah, I mean, and then that's huge, and that also too, I think, really ties in with what you were saying earlier about discipline and identity.
Yeah.
Because like part of the reason why like I use that strategy with people who are just getting started, because especially too, if you see somebody who's like really overweight, really unhealthy, there's definitely something going on mentally, whether like low self-esteem or just what have you. And so
Yeah.
like if they say like they try to come out the gate hard, like doing like paleo and training 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, then when they predictably hit that setback, which is going to happen because of course it
Yeah.
is, then
It's
it's
a rite
like,
of
well,
passage. Yeah.
oh, like, oh, exactly. That they're going to be saying, well, I'm a piece of shit anyway, and this isn't working, so I guess we're done. And whereas, like, when you
Yeah.
sort of like, create those easy wins for yourself, you modify your expectations to kind of where the reality is, then
Yeah.
it ends up, helping you build that, sort of stack of undeniable proof that you hear Alex Hormozy talk about a lot, which then creates
Yes.
that momentum to carry you forward. And then you can start modify your expectations again and elevating your standards to sort of meet that new reality. But it all, comes down to sort of like creating those habits, creating those systems, and a lot of times like modifying that way you view yourself and the standards that you're
Yeah.
going to hold yourself to.
Yeah, absolutely. And then like I always think of it from the mental performance lens of like how do you reframe those setbacks, those injuries, whatever
Mm,
roadblocks that you're running up on. And like I was saying, it is a rite of passage for your next evolution. You
totally.
either are going to let it break you or you're going to let it refine you. And I'm going to choose to let it refine me. This injury that I'm dealing with now, it's not going to break me. I'm okay with it. I don't need to go back to the gym. I'm going to do jujitsu for the rest of my life, foreseeably. So if that's the case, taking 1 week off, as we've talked about in the past, is a very small blip on my lifespan of jujitsu that I'm going to be training in, right? So I
Mm,
look at it in that if I zoom out and say, okay, that's this tiny little dot on my lifeline of when I'm going to do jujitsu. If I just take this little bit of time and I'm smart about it, I can actually come back and my ankle could be stronger because now I'm focused to do the type of rehab and keep the type of attention on it that I maybe neglected before. So I think that is something that, and I'll tell you this, I have a really high powered client who's the CEO of a big tech wearable company. He just had a surgery. He's been laid down for a while. We're going through PT and rehab with him right now. He can't do all the things. He can't squat, the over 200 pounds and deadlift over 300 pounds and do all these things that he wants us to do. And because he's a competitive athlete himself. And he said to me yesterday, you know what, I feel like after I come back from this, because I'm doing all this rehab and stuff I've been neglecting, and I was working through my pain and injuries before and wasn't listening to my body. Now I am listening to my body, and I know I'm going to come back stronger. And maybe some of these things that I wasn't doing before, like the core strengthening and the hip mobility and all the stuff that I was not addressing, that I am now addressing because I've had to slow down and address it. It's going to make me better, and I'm maybe even a better athlete after this once I build back. And I think that's the type of mindset you want to create for yourself, is, not let it break you, let it refine you, and let it be this rite of passage to your next evolution. Because without a doubt, injuries and setbacks are going to happen. It's just going to happen. Nobody has a perfect life. It just doesn't happen that way.
Totally.
So you have to be able to take it and allow it to refine you, and just redirect your attention and focus towards what really matters.
Absolutely. And I know this sort of applies to every domain, and I feel like we've been leaning kind of heavy on like the training aspect. Now, is there any way you would modify these things for the diet piece? Like, I remember hearing you say, well,
Yeah.
years ago, that it's easier to quit smoking than it is to, change
Yeah.
eating habits. And so, what advice would you give to somebody who's specifically struggling with staying disciplined on their diet?
I would say you start with the most obvious thing first, the most external thing, and that's with environment. I think it's way easier to stay disciplined when the environment forces your compliance. So, for example, I mean, you can't eat junk food if it's not in your house.
Mhm.
Simple.
Very
Like, if I
true.
don't
Yeah.
buy ice cream, I don't buy candy, I don't buy sweets and desserts and excess, starchy carbs and all those things that I know are not going to be good for me, and properly fuel me. If they're not here, I can't eat them. It's going to force compliance because my environment is set up for it. Now, that'll work in the short term. So I think that that's great. And I think you need to start there because that'll get the ball rolling. But then I think, again, it goes to identity first. I think, like, instead of saying, like, I think get the word try, get the word should out of your vocabulary as much as possible, because try implies failure. If you tried something, that means it literally means you didn't do it. You failed at it, right? So
Yeah.
get try out of it. Maybe say I didn't do it yet, right? That's a way to kind of reframe it in a more positive tone. But getting should out of your diet, like saying I'm trying to stick to my diet, it's just not very this is not very powerful and empowering words to say to yourself. Maybe shift it to I'm the kind of person who fuels my body for performance, right?
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, because like when you say like I'm trying, you're allowing for the possibility of failure rather than simply I'm doing this.
Yes. Or the word can't. I can't. Can't means impossible, right? Can't means
Yeah,
it's
that's
not
true.
possible for you to do. I cannot. So if you say I can't, and my kids, I'll catch them all the time. Oh, I can't do that, Dad. I can't make that shot from there. I can't make a layup, or I can't use my left foot in soccer, whatever it may be. And I was like, can't means it's impossible for you. I'm like, yes, you can. You're just not like very good at it yet because you haven't practiced it enough. You only get good at what you practice. And my kids know we changed the script. We don't say practice makes perfect because there is no perfect. We say practice makes permanent. And that's
Oh, I
that's
love that.
they that's how they know the quote now. Practice makes permanent. They don't even know what practice makes perfect is because we never used it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
try to teach them that is that, like, what you do and what you repeat becomes part of who you are. And so this is why identity is such a big piece. Like in Atomic Habits, James Clear says every action you take is a vote for the person you're becoming. Cast votes for this identity that you're trying to create, right? So I'm a healthy person is an identity statement, right? I'm trying to
Mm.
stick to my diet is a process that, says I'm going to fail at this.
Yeah, there's certainly like a lack of conviction in that statement.
Yes. And then
Yeah.
I think the next step, that so, focus on the environment, then you go to identity, right? Start looking at how do I need to be in order to do this, and what does that person then do? Start to pre-decide where you're weak. So, for example, don't try to make game time decisions with your hungry brain. If you've ever gone to the grocery store when you're hungry, you buy a whole bunch of shit that you don't need, that you probably shouldn't eat because your brain is seeking dopamine. And just the fact of looking and thinking about something you could potentially eat later that's dog shit for you is very satisfying. And you'll throw it in the cart and you'll spend money on it. And so
Mhm.
if you pre-decide, for example, meal prep, that's one way to do it. So you know exactly what food you're going to be eating later on in the day. It's already made for you. You're already pre-decided. Um, I like to look at food menus before I go out at the restaurant I'm going to and decide what I'm going to eat before I get there. Now I'll listen to the specials because usually there's some good stuff that's not on the menu. But I'm going to look at the menu and say, when I go to I'm going to have this steak with this side of vegetables or whatever it may be. And
Mhm.
so that's what I think, pre-deciding where you know that you're weak. We've talked about this in the past, and knowing what distracts you from doing the work you need to do in your business. Like if you already know what distracts you, then you already have a leg up on knowing what you need to set aside and avoid, and set up your environment so that those things aren't even there to disrupt you in any way. So I think that's another a big thing. And I would just say, like, the last part of that too would be like delaying tactics. Like usually if you have a craving and you're craving
Mhm.
something, those cravings die off after like 5 to 10 minutes if you just don't give in to them. They say that like too with like any addictions and nicotine and things like that, is like when you get the craving, you get the urge to want to eat something or have that sweet. If you engage with it right away, then you're wiring that in, that pattern of, I feel this, I want this, the solution is to go and eat it and I feel good, and then I immediately feel guilt and shame afterwards, but I felt good
Mhm.
while I was eating it, but I feel bad that I did it, right? And that's just
Mhm.
never a good feeling, or so I think like if you can delay those feelings of cravings, whatever, for whatever food you're craving or whatever it may be, you kind of let them kind of, you don't have to fight it head on, right? There's this kind of
Mhm.
like delayed gratification, and then we know that there's a part of the brain that when you avoid doing and like slipping into these bad habits, your brain and your discipline builds, you build that muscle, and your ability to be able to avoid it in the future becomes way higher, in as far as like compliance goes with that.
That makes total sense because like you're there too, you're almost just kind of talking about like riding the wave of that craving, and because that will eventually subside, and then just like
Yes.
you said, sort of flexing those muscles. Because if you're always building that association of like, well, I crave this, then I do this, then it's
Yeah.
like, then yeah, you're just reinforcing this like negative habit loop over and over and over, and
Yes.
that's going to make it so much tougher to break, because like really I think that's that like the crux, like the core of like dysfunction eating and food addiction and things like that are,
Yeah.
you have the craving, you indulge the craving, and because oftentimes too like that stems from some emotional need, both good and bad, for
Totally.
that's happened over your life that you then taught yourself that you medicate with food. I know that's
Oh yeah,
something I've
toddlers
yeah.
toddlers crying. What does mom and
Mhm.
dad do? That, oh, here, have this, eat this cupcake, or eat this, here, have some goldfish. And all of a sudden that child associates with, when I'm in emotional pain, food is the
Mhm.
thing that soothes me, because we know food gives you that dopamine, makes you feel good. And so now we become an adult and we still have that strategy that was given to us. We didn't decide it. It was taught to us via our parents' actions, and they were just doing what they thought was best for us, right? It was like,
Mhm.
they know that
Absolutely.
food calms us down. The problem is we become adults and we can't put the food down, and we use it to emotionally eat,
Mhm.
because it's been wired into us, and it works. It's a solution. The problem is it also results in excess body weight, these cycles of shame and guilt and all these negative things, and then self-sabotage, right? So it's not your fault that these things happen to you. We all deal with them. You and I have talked about it personally. You've dealt with them. I've dealt with them. So many clients I've dealt with have dealt with it. But I think, like, again, couple key points: don't fight cravings. Try to outlast them. And then also too, eating clean isn't a punishment. A lot of people see like, oh, I have to eat clean. It's like they feel like they're punishing themselves by eating clean.
Yeah.
No, it's not at all. It's permission to perform at a higher level when you eat clean. I mean, you get
Oh,
better
exactly.
fuel. You get better
Yeah.
fuel, you get lower inflammation, you sleep better, your body looks better aesthetically. And also too, guess what? When you're feeling good, when you're eating good, you're also feeling good about yourself. You have more confidence, and you're not going to guilt and shame yourself, because there's nothing to guilt and shame yourself over. You're eating well. You know what I mean? So like, it is a positive cycle that happens from that. It is not punishment, it's permission.
Oh, absolutely. And you're literally just building like a better version of you by doing that.
Oh
And
yeah.
then too, it ends up creating that like sort of feeling of momentum when like, no, this is something I do. This is just who I
Hmm.
am now. And I think that all like comes back to that sort of sense of identity that you were talking about, where it's like, if you just begin identifying as like, no, I am somebody who eats to perform, because I am an athlete, I am, that's the standard I hold for myself, then yeah, it stops becoming eating clean. It's just I'm eating, but it
Yeah.
just speaks to sort of like cultural dysfunction that we have around food, that we need to specify when we're eating healthy, when it's like that,
Hmm.
because like unfortunately, this I think like, ties into everything. It's like bad food is just readily available. It's an easy fix to, in the short term for a lot of problems, because you'll feel good,
Yeah.
doing it. You'll get the dopamine spike out in regards to like the parent and the toddler. It's an easy fix to get them to stop screaming. you
And
know.
we haven't even gotten into alcohol, right? And alcohol is
Oh,
another piece of diet
absolutely.
too that is absolutely detrimental. I mean, to your progress and to everything. Whether we know how much it disrupts sleep, we know how much it kills brain cells. We know, we know how toxic it is when your body is trying to metabolize and remove alcohol from your system that you just ingested. It turns off all fat burning, it turns off all muscle building, and allocates all of that energy to metabolizing this toxin out of your body. And so, as long as you're doing that to yourself, right, you're not going to be as clear the next day, so you're not going to have a good training session. It costs money. It's socially, it's weird too. It's one of those things, and clearly you can tell I'm not a huge fan of it. I've cut my drinking back dramatically every single year over the past like 4 years or so. I've drank less and less. To this year, I mean, I maybe touched alcohol like 6 times all year, and maybe that was like one drink or half a drink, on each of those times. So I barely drank anything, because when I look at my Whoop data that measures, I track it every day whether I drank or not. When I look at my Whoop data, I have a 19% worse recovery when I drink alcohol the day before. That is a 1/5 less. That could be the difference between, me winning or losing my match on Saturday. You know what I mean? Like that,
Totally.
it's a huge factor. And just, it doesn't make sense. It's great socially, but it's a weird substance, because it's one of those things where it's so socially acceptable. In fact, if you don't drink, people usually think you're weird. If you go out and
Mhm.
everyone's drinking and you're like, no, I'm all set, everybody kind of looks at you like, what's wrong with this person? Like sobriety is like this weird thing now. And I think maybe it's starting to shift and change culturally. But I think that's
Mhm.
another big thing too, is there's a lot of people who just can't avoid drinking. And when you're eating like shit and you're a little bit buzzed or drunk, you're going to make worse decisions. Your hungry
Mhm.
brain is going to make pretty stupid decisions when you're inebriated like that. So I think, like I said, pre-plan, these things. Plan your weaknesses while you're in a strong state and when you're in a clear state. And if you can do that, your strategy is going to work. It's going to work better. Why wait until you're hungry and you're craving and all that stuff to try to make those decisions? Plan ahead
Mhm.
for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then make sure when you set that plan that you stick to it. And that's, so where the discipline piece comes from. And so like,
Totally.
what are early strategies you would give to somebody who's just sort of like, say like they going from complete sedentary lifestyle and complete like dysfunctional eating patterns. If they were looking to get started, what would be what would be like sort of like the first block of planning you would give them?
I would tell them to write down what you want. Write
Mhm.
down what it is that you want to accomplish. And you can start with like a timeline. Like, don't say 12 months from now, maybe don't even say 6 months from now, but 90 days. In 3 months, what do you want to have happen? How do you want your life to look different in 3 months? And
Oh
then
yeah.
work from there, right? How do I want to feel with my fitness, with my nutrition, with my health, with my sleep? How do I want that to look in 3 months? Right. So, what is the ideal version of my future self 3 months from now if everything went the way I wanted it to? I would start there. And then I would write that down, and writing it down,
Mhm.
because that engages a different part of your brain that starts to bring it into reality. We don't want to just loop the thought and just think about it. You're not Jay-Z, who doesn't write down lyrics and just can remember everything in your head. There's only so many rappers and so many people who can do that where they don't write anything down. I heard like there's certain comedians, Dave Chappelle doesn't write down his jokes. He stores them all, but like he's one of the goats. You know what I mean? Like the top
Mhm.
of the top can do that, the Jay-Z's, et cetera, the Lil Waynes. But for the rest of us, like, mere mortals, we have to write things down, and that really will engage part of your brain. It brings it into reality. It makes it a real thing when you start to write it out, because now your hand is taking action on that thing you want to accomplish. So I think you start there, is like get very clear on what it is you want, let's say 3 months from now. And then from there, what I would say is, I would say, imagine we're having a conversation with, that 3 month, older version of ourselves. And we asked him, wow, you're really doing excellent. You're, doing everything you wanted to. You're working out at a consistent rate. You're eating clean. What did you do 3 months ago when what did you do over the last 3 months that allowed for that to happen? And get somebody thinking from that space of, what would I have to do in order to get to this? What are all those little tasks? Like, how many days a week do I have to work out? What would my nutrition plan look like? What time would I go to bed and wake up? You know what I mean? How would I take breaks within the day to, recover and refocus myself when I do get distracted, when I do get, mentally, or I do get, cravings or things like that. So I would say that is a big thing. And then, like you said, I think it goes to collecting small wins.
Mhm.
And again, writing them down. I think if you can write stuff down at the end of the day and start to track these things, obviously having a plan is good. But just asking yourself, those certain questions, like what went well today? What went well? What did I learn? What do I want to do better? And if you focus on those, key areas, I think you start to build momentum. You focus on the positives. You start training your brain and your reticular activating system not to look for threats, but to look for more opportunity. And when your brain's focused in on looking for more opportunity, I think that's where you start thriving, because now you start seeing things that are becoming available to you, as opposed to things that are holding you back in some way. So that's really where I would start with things.
I think that that's huge, especially doing the sort of almost like future imaging of kind of like where you want to go, who you want to be, things like that. Because then every step you take toward that is going to then create a positive association with
Yes.
performing that good action, rather than, like you said, viewing it as a punishment, as like something that
Yes.
you have to do, that you're saddled with. Instead you're just that now building this like awesome thing for yourself, and that's going to feel good, just start checking off those boxes,
Chasing
performing
pleasure
each
as
of those
opposed to
actions.
avoiding pain. Yeah.
Absolutely. Hell yeah. And I think that, I'm not gonna lie to you, I think that's probably a good place to stop. That sort of, we answer, I
Yeah.
think we, ad nauseum, answered the questions that we had.
For sure. Yeah, great discussion. I think this will be huge. I mean, people I think are always looking at how to understand motivation and discipline,
Mm,
discipline when it comes to your diet. And then, we touched on a little bit about overcoming injuries and how to get into a better mental headspace for that. But I think just the strategies on where to start when it comes to, well, how do I start focusing in and get more disciplined? And how we talked about motivation is a mood. It's not it gets you started, but it's not going to get
yeah.
you the results you want. It's the discipline that gets you results. And you can't feel your way into discipline. You have to act into it. And that's, I think, the
Totally.
biggest key there is, when you stop needing to be in the mood, you start becoming unstoppable, because now you are disciplined. You're just showing up. And uh, discipline isn't about feeling good. It's about feeling
Yeah.
proud. It's about feeling proud later because you showed up and did the work that you said you were going to do, regardless of how you felt about it. And
Oh,
that's the muscle that builds and creates momentum over time.
oh, absolutely. I mean, 'cause, like, the reality is nobody who's done anything got there by doing everything they wanted when they wanted to do it. And so I
Right.
think like developing that muscle of delayed gratification, of knowing like, yeah, I might suck a little bit now, but it's going to pay off great later, is
Yeah.
so huge.
Yeah. And just last piece on that discipline with your diet. If it's in your house, it's in your mouth. Remember that.
Yeah,
So just get it out
it's a
of
good
your
little
environment.
soundbite. Hell
Fix the
yeah, love it.
fix the environment first. And then, yeah, hope anyone wants to reach out to us if they need help with any of this stuff. We're always available to have a discussion about it and take this stuff deeper, or ask any personal questions. But yeah, looking forward to the next conversation we have about this stuff, Ryan. It's been great.
Awesome. Hell yeah, same here.
All right, we'll see you soon, man.
Yep, see you
Bye.
soon.